Hi everybody. I know it's been a little bit of a wait for this video, but I finally did it. This video is about King Baldwin IV of Jerusalem. He was a king who ruled Jerusalem during the crusades. He lived from 1161 AD to I believe it's 1190. He was afflicted with leprosy, but he still was able to lead Jerusalem and protect the holy city from the enemies at the time, which was the Muslim armies led by Saladin. So let's get into it. So the year is 1161. Baldwin was born into a family of royalty. Almeric, his father, and Agnes of Courtenay. Baldwin's uncle, Baldwin III, ruled Jerusalem until his untimely death in 1163. With no heirs, Almeric, pressured by his council, annulled his marriage to Agnes due to the feelings from the people. They didn't like Agnes, I guess. Baldwin grew up without a mother and was distanced from his sister, Sibylla. Almeric, now the king of Jerusalem, after the death of his brother, ensured that his son would be a well-learned man, so he sent Baldwin to live with William of Tyre, a well-traveled cleric. As the days passed, William taught Baldwin everything a Frankish nobleman should know: mathematics, reading, and writing. One day, when playing with other children, William noticed something. He wasn't flinching when pinched by other children. He hired Arab physicians to treat him, but treatments failed. Leprosy was suspected. William continued his education, teaching him to ride by only using his legs, a Frankish skill. Baldwin soon lost feeling in his arms. As the years went on, he started resembling his father into his adolescent years, still learning all he could from William of Tyre. In June 1174, Almeric, Baldwin's father, died from dysentery. Upon Almeric's death, the High Court dealt with the issue of succession. Almeric's daughters were too young for regency, and the High Court suspected that Baldwin had contracted leprosy based on William's findings, but there was no other option. After days of indecision, Baldwin was chosen as heir, with expectations of Sibylla marrying to have an heir in the future if Baldwin could not provide an heir. He was crowned immediately on the 75th anniversary of the seizure of Jerusalem. Until he reached the age of regency, which was 15 at the time, Raymond of Tripoli and his mother Agnes traded authority positions. Raymond of Tripoli and Baldwin's mother Agnes traded authority positions as Baldwin's closest relatives. Interestingly enough, contemporary sources say that Agnes used Baldwin's condition of leprosy for personal gain, but we can't say that for sure. But we do know that Baldwin formed a strong connection with Agnes. During Baldwin's youth, it became clear that he was in fact affected by leprosy. Puberty was said to have hastened the effects. No one knows who Baldwin contracted it from. His face and limbs became inflamed and scarred. This caused his subjects to feel uneasy in his company. According to Muslim scholars, he was never segregated and was known to be respected as a king, loyal, kind, and philosophical. The people were devoted to him after some time. On his second anniversary of coronation, July 15th, 1176 AD, Baldwin reached the age of majority and took the throne. Age of regency, 15, and took the throne. As soon as he took government, Baldwin planned a tactical full-scale attack on Egypt with his advisors. Baldwin knew this was the perfect opportunity while the great Saladin was on campaign in modern-day Syria at this time. Despite having only the use of one hand, Baldwin still took place in the fighting. Baldwin and Raymond de Tripoli led their men in a raid in Bakua Valley, modern-day Lebanon, where they defeated the garrison of Damascus, forcing the great Saladin to abandon his campaign. Still planning his massive offensive on Egypt, Baldwin knew he'd need naval support, so he sent Renaud de Chatillon to his family in Constantinople for aid. During the planning, Sibylla's husband and Baldwin's friend, William of Montferrat, fell ill. When Baldwin visited him in Ascalon, it was a port city on the Mediterranean coast. He fell deathly ill as well. William died in April of 1177 AD, leaving Sibylla pregnant. This left Baldwin with no advisor for the offensive attack on Egypt. But there was still hope for the fleet from Constantinople. During his illness, Baldwin entrusted military leadership to the French knight Renaud, hoping he can successfully pull off the offensive. Baldwin's cousins arrived in the east that September in 1177, Philip I and Henry II as well, to help aid the attack. Feeling defeated and with no end in sight, Baldwin returned to Jerusalem still deathly ill. When he returned, he convened a council. Baldwin offered his regency to Philip I, and according to records, he declined. The Byzantines, the people of Constantinople, in turn, with Philip, Henry, and Renaud and others, sent a war fleet down to Egypt in preparation, but ultimately failed due to uncooperativeness of the leading nobles. Arguments raged as Baldwin tried to keep his allies loyal to each other and Jerusalem. After the failed offensive, should the crusading armies invaded and succeeded, should the crusading armies invaded Egypt and succeeded, the Crusader kingdoms would have controlled the most powerful country in the East and the most prosperous. In October of 1177, Baldwin's allies, Philip and Raymond, left to support an attack on Hama in Syria. With Baldwin's allies gone on campaign, Saladin seized the opportunity to strike back against this mysterious young foe who was risen to regency. Saladin, also known as Salahaddin Yusuf ibn Uhub, I might have butchered that, but I guess I'll have to find out later, was the founder of the Ubayyid dynasty. Hailing from Kurdish descent, he was the first sultan to rule both Egypt and Syria. He was a brilliant tactician and head and leader amongst the Muslim military at the time. Saladin planned an attack on Baldwin's territories back in Jerusalem. Baldwin, still recovering from malaria, heard of this and rose to the call. He called for his Knights Templar, and they rode to Gaza, a city to the south. While his Knight Templar rode for Gaza, Baldwin rode to meet the legendary Sultan. King Baldwin set up to defend the fortress of Ascalon and issued Araraban, an old French proclamation calling all able-bodied men to take up arms and defend Jerusalem. On November 22nd, the Sultan Saladin arrived at Ascalon with an enormous army. As Baldwin IV rode out to meet him, he saw that he and his men were drastically outnumbered, so he retreated into Ascalon. Saladin confidently rode to Jerusalem without any trouble. Baldwin, however, somehow contacted his Templars to come and aid Ascalon. The Templars he contacted were at Gaza. Reynaud even rode down from the north and met with Baldwin and his Templars. With these new-found reinforcements, Baldwin knew that if he didn't try to stop Saladin now, then all of Jerusalem and the people there would be at stake. At Montezagard, on November 25th, 1177, Reynaud and the Templars and King Baldwin attacked Saladin's dispersed army, and with the legendary King Baldwin in the forefront of the battle, he led his outnumbered Christian army and defeated Saladin in a deadly, gruesome battle. Saladin, who barely survived, escaped, the image of a white-robed, courageous king searing his mind. He still managed to have a glimmer of respect towards the young king. Afterwards, Baldwin felt immortal. He felt as though he would live to see 100, but deep down, he knew his sickness was only getting worse. In April 1179, Baldwin experienced several incursions with Saladin's army. In late June, Baldwin's army was routed as he was marching to the fiefdoms of Bedouin and Beirut. During the skirmish, Baldwin was flung off his horse. Because of his disability with leprosy, he wasn't able to remount on his own. During the panic, a brave Knight Templar carried him to safety. His identity is not recorded. He's a mystery. During the siege of Chastelet, Baldwin summoned troops to a nearby city to rush to aid the defenders, but they were too late. Baldwin believed passionately that they needed the relic of the true cross. It was believed at the time to be the cross that Jesus was crucified on. The Crusaders at the time, they believed that it gave them strength in battle. Baldwin believed passionately that they needed the relic of the true cross to strengthen the troops, but it did not arrive in time for the march on Chastelet, so they lost the city. After Sibylla's husband, William, died, she gave birth to a son in 1178. Baldwin started to consider new suitors for his sister. Deep down, he knew he needed to secure a new heir before it was too late. He couldn't risk the enemy seizing control in the power vacuum after his death. He couldn't risk losing the Holy City. Once Baldwin wrote to the King of France, quote, "To be deprived of the use of one's limbs is of little help to one carrying out the work of government. It is not fitting that a hand so weak as mine should hold power when fear of Arab aggression presses daily upon the Holy City, and when my sickness increases, so does the enemy's daring." During this time, Baldwin effectively foiled a coup planned by a few nobles, hoping to persuade Baldwin for his sister's hand. Baldwin married Sibylla to Guy of Lusignan. I just think it's so cool that that Baldwin, although he was king of the holy city of Jerusalem at the time, he was rich and he was, so lucky, but he was still so humble, and he always asked for aid, which is something to look out for. In 1182, Baldwin had a truce with Saladin instilled, but was closing to an end soon. Throughout this time, Saladin and Baldwin had a respect for one another as leaders. The truce set to expire on May 1182 AD was broken mid-1181 by Reynaud de Chatillon, who seized a merchant caravan on its way to Damascus, out of Egypt. Reynaud disregarded the king's request to make peace with Saladin. With attacks from Muslims in Constantinople, this gave Saladin confidence to march towards Jerusalem. They attacked any settlement in their way, until King Baldwin with his host of Templars, although outnumbered, defeated Salahadin's army at Bethsun, an Israelite city. Historians attribute this victory to the Templars, feeling emboldened due to Baldwin joining them on the battlefield. Even though he was disabled from the waist down, he still rode his horse into battle with the Knights Templar, and seeing that on the battlefield would embolden me. Tensions rose between the two powers. Salahadin pushed and Baldwin pushed harder. Salahadin refused a truce. Baldwin became worried. He knew he needed to do something to stop Salahadin from marching to Jerusalem. He needed to protect the holy city for the Christians. In the winter of 1182 AD, Baldwin besieged Damascus and threatened to destroy a mosque. After Salahadin refused peace yet again, local Christians convinced him otherwise, so he backed off from destroying the mosque. Even though the war was brutal, they still respected one another. In the year 1183, Baldwin could not walk or use his hands. The leprosy had taken his ability to blink as well. This caused his cornea to dry up, and it caused him to become blind. Nevertheless, King Baldwin summoned troops to defend Jerusalem against Salahadin. Baldwin developed a terrible fever. Feeling the end was near, he summoned his high council and entrusted government to Guy of Lisignan, Sibylla's husband at the time. After recovering, Baldwin prepared Guy for regency, but was reluctant. Political drama ensued as Guy continuously refused Baldwin's counsel and the like. In retaliation, Baldwin replaced Guy with governors of his fiefs. Guy lost his fiefdoms, and so because of Guy being so reluctant to take regency if Baldwin lost his life due to leprosy, Baldwin replaced leadership of Guy's fiefdoms, his settlements and kingdoms, with governors as a punishment, somewhat. Baldwin replaced Guy with governors of his fiefdoms. All the while, the castle of Carac was being attacked. It was a Templar castle at the time. In the year late 1184, Baldwin learned of the massacre of Darum, a city under royal protection. At the time, they were giving information to Baldwin about Egyptian movements, like Muslim Egyptian movements. That way he kind of had an eye on Egypt. But Darum was attacked, and it was also under royal protection. The massacre was led by Guy. Baldwin, while recovering from another fever, bestowed regency to Raymond with no better alternative, as a punishment to Guy. That way he wouldn't become king after Baldwin died of his sickness. With no better alternative, Baldwin bestowed regency to Raymond de Châtillon. At this time, Baldwin soon realized that this would be his last fever. Attended by his vassals, he was led to his deathbed. He paid homages to his nobles and his nephew, and instilled plans for a peaceful transition after his death, hoping that someone would protect the holy city and its people, as he did during his life. In March 1185, Baldwin IV died and was buried with his father Almeric. In the year 1190, Salahadin marched to Jerusalem and defeated Guy and Raymond and destroyed Baldwin's realm completely. Although Salahadin recaptured Jerusalem for the Muslims and destroyed Baldwin's kingdom, he still fondly remembered his opponent, Baldwin IV. Baldwin's death marred the king's legacy, with historians tracing fatal discord to Baldwin's reign. Yet while Baldwin was on the throne, the kingdom lost no territory and flourished economically and spiritually. Baldwin understood the importance of curbing Salah-ad-Din's power, which was reflected in his choice of ministers. He did not devise strategy or diplomacy alone, and delegated church patronage and finances to his mother Agnes and uncle Jocelyn, respectively. His chief contribution was his determination not to abdicate before finding a suitable successor, despite leprosy making government an unbearable burden. As was clear during his reign, and especially in his disastrous aftermath, Baldwin alone preserved unity in the kingdom. Contemporary Christian theologians were divided on the issue of leprosy. Pope Alexander III showed little sympathy when writing about Baldwin, declaring leprosy a just judgment of God. But another school of thought encouraged the faithful to see Christ in the affected. Baldwin's reign may have led to a lesser stigmatism of the illness in the 13th century Kingdom of Jerusalem. His subjects' acceptance of his illness confounded Muslims. Imad ad-Din al-Isfahani wrote, "In spite of illness, the Franks were loyal to him. They gave him every encouragement, being satisfied to have him as their ruler. They exalted him. They were anxious to keep him in office, but they paid no attention to his leprosy." I just think it's really cool that Muslim scholars knew that. Baldwin's public image may have been aided by his chastity, seen as an evidence of extraordinary sanctity, and his success against Salah-ad-Din was interpreted as a sign of God's favor. After the disastrous Seventh Crusade, a crusader was told by an old man in Damascus, "I have seen a time when King Baldwin of Jerusalem, the one who was a leper, beat Salah-ad-Din, although he had 300 armed men against Salah-ad-Din's 3,000. But now your sins have come to such a pass that we round you up in fields like cattle." Along his perceived sanctity, Baldwin was primarily a knight, both in character and in upbringing. And to contemporaries, his most distinctive traits were his courage and honorableness. And that was a short description of King Baldwin IV's life and his character and his feats that he had in his life. The first time that I thought of him as like a historical figure to think about really was when I watched a movie called Kingdom of Heaven. It depicted him as a mysterious, white-robed, masked character with leprosy, and he was noble and honorable and brave. Although there are no historical records of him wearing a metal mask, for those of you who have seen the movie, you're probably wondering, but there are no records of him wearing a mask, which is unfortunate. But I think he was an important figure in Jerusalem's timeline, and I think he should be recognized more as a figure in history. I think he can be overlooked easily, but I think that he did what he could for the holy city of Jerusalem and for the Christian people. Anyway, thanks for joining me. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.